Story 1. When I was in elementary school, I spent time with a group of kids from a daycare I attended for a few months. They often talked about the sports they were involved in, and I didn't want to feel left out, so I told them I played hockey even though I didn't. Fast forward a few months to the next school year, one of those kids, whom I thought I would never see again, transferred to my school. He remembered what I said about hockey and brought it up several times in front of my other friends. Now, I had to maintain the lie to my entire grade. Because I never changed schools, I kept this lie going throughout middle school and high school. I'm 27 now, and I still uphold this lie because I remain friends with some of those people, and it somehow continues to come up in conversation. I have a friend whose children play hockey, and she asked if I could give them any tips since they are just starting out. I've lied about this for so long that I'm beginning to think I actually played hockey in elementary school. I'm pretty sure I have false memories of being on the ice. I should add that our school never had a hockey team, but there was a local children's hockey team. I was lucky that nobody knew anyone on that team. It's not a big lie, but it's one I never imagined would spiral out of control. Story 2. I hated pineapples when I was a kid, so when I was around 12, I made up a pineapple allergy, not knowing if this was actually a thing. Most people would simply say, "All right, no foods with pineapples then," and I was happy. Fast forward a few years, and I had forgotten about my supposed pineapple allergy. I ended up in the hospital after an accident. They put me under because I was in a lot of pain and obtained my medical history from my mom, who informed them that I had a pineapple allergy. This was entirely irrelevant to my hospital stay. I had dislocated a shoulder and cracked a bone. But one of the doctors remarked that he thought my allergy was strange. Later, my mom asked me to get an allergy test done because the doctor mentioned my pineapple allergy. When I visited my general practitioner to get a referral to a specialist, I confessed that the pineapple allergy was made up. He found it amusing but told me that it's unlikely I have a pineapple allergy if I am not also allergic to pollen. Today, I actually really like pineapples as long as they are not on a pizza. Story 3. When I was 7, I told my classmates that my dad was a secret agent because he always left for missions, which were actually business trips. I thought it was just a fun little story, but one day a teacher overheard and casually asked my parents about it during a meeting. Instead of correcting me, my dad, being the prankster he is, just smirked and said, "I can't confirm or deny that." The rumor spread like wildfire, and for years, kids thought my dad was some kind of James Bond. Even in high school, people still asked me if he worked for the Central Intelligence Agency. The truth? He sells office furniture. Story 4. Not me, but a friend of mine. In primary school, she used to love the school lunches, private school. I never attended one, but I assume they serve nicer food. She figured out that if she said she hadn't eaten breakfast, teachers would worry and send her to lunch first. This became a pattern where she made it seem as if her family didn't feed her in the morning, sending her to school hungry so she could get lunch first and larger portions. It escalated to the point where her parents were brought into the school along with social services to investigate them for neglect. Story 5. In the 2nd grade, I would chew my food at lunch, hold it in my mouth with milk, and then spit it all over the floor when we returned to class so that I could go home sick. I did this so often that my mom took me to the doctor to figure it out and had the church saying prayers for me. It's safe to say I was not popular. Story 6. In 4th grade, I wasn't paying attention and thought the teacher asked if we had ever seen the movie Babe. I raised my hand enthusiastically because my family had seen it and loved it, but I realized I was the only one raising my hand. My teacher said, "All right, you can bring it in for us to watch." She had asked if we had the VHS tape of it, and I accidentally volunteered to bring it. The problem was that we didn't own the VHS tape. It may not sound like a big deal, but as a 9-year-old, it ruined my day. I was so sad that I wouldn't talk to anyone at recess, couldn't bring myself to admit it to my teacher, and had to confess to my parents when I got home that I had accidentally lied and that we needed to buy the VHS of Babe for school. This was the mid-1990s, so new movies were expensive, and my parents were not well off. As a consequence, I had to rake the leaves by myself that weekend. Even though no one in my class ever knew that I had lied, it took a significant toll on me. My parents recommended renting it, but rental tapes were clearly marked, and it would have shown that I lied. Even though it was accidental, I was committed to the lie. Don't ask me why, I was 9. Story 7. I told my friend I had a twin just for fun and ended up switching places at recess for months until a teacher became suspicious. Story 8. I had the opposite experience. I would tell the truth and I would still get accused of lying. One time, the toothpaste was watery, and my mom was certain I had tried pouring water into the toothpaste tube. I hadn't, although once she mentioned it, it sounded interesting. I was in early elementary school. We went through hours of interrogation, and then she started calling the police and reporting that someone had poisoned our toothpaste. Eventually, I broke down and admitted that I had done it. I still wasn't sure what it was, but I tried to follow the phrasing my mom had used. False confessions are a reality, and I wish I hadn't learned that before I turned 10. Story 9. I wanted to stay home from school when I was 12, so I pretended I had a sore stomach. My mother asked me several questions, and I answered them confidently. She ended up rushing me to the hospital, where a concerned doctor asked me the same questions. I remember enjoying all the attention until they decided to take my appendix out just to be safe. By that point, I was too far in and just let it happen. Story 10. In the 4th grade, I failed a math test, which for me wasn't a huge surprise because I struggled with math. Anyway, my teacher's policy was to have us get our parents to sign our failed tests so they were aware of our performance. I was afraid to show my mom my test, and her signature was simple enough, so I forged it and gave it to my teacher. She immediately accused me of forgery, handed it back to me, and said she was calling my mom. When I got home from school that day, my mom asked why my teacher said I forged her signature. Instead of admitting the truth, I showed my mom the test, and she saw my forged signature. It matched her signature closely enough that she actually got mad at my teacher for accusing me of being a liar because she believed she had signed my test. The next day, she took me to school, asked to see my teacher, and confronted her for calling me a liar, affirming that she signed my test. My teacher ended up apologizing to me. Years later, when I was in college, I told my mom what I had done, and she thought it was hilarious and called me a brat. Story 11. My mom gave me a kiss on the forehead when she dropped me off at kindergarten, and being the little hateful gremlin I was, I wiped it off. Her lipstick got smudged all over and left the area red. Later that day, my teacher noticed, pulled me aside, and questioned me privately. In a panic, I claimed my mother hit me on the head with a hammer. I was interviewed by 5 more teachers, including the vice principal and principal. Not once did I break away from my story and in detail explained how the whole thing went down. I even started to cry and claimed I was in so much pain. I put on a show worthy of an Oscar and was given ice to soothe my aching head. When my mother came to pick me up, I knew I had messed up. I was terrified and hid behind my teacher. At the time, I didn't realize the gravity of the situation. My teacher and principal got defensive and wouldn't let my mother near. They were about to call the police and Child Protective Services. Despite the threats, my mother marched towards me, pulled her skirt, licked it, and wiped the red mark off my forehead while calling everyone idiots. They ended up apologizing to my mother and let me go. My mother was very angry and let me have it. She spanked me all the way home and told me how close I was to ending up in state custody and her in jail. Funnily enough, a police officer saw the entire incident, shrugged, and continued with his day. My mother never kissed me after that. Story 12. My brother and I told our 5-year-old cousin that she had a demon in her stomach because we were bored. We said she needed to drink water to drown it. We forgot about it, but hours later, she looked like she was about to pass out and appeared pregnant. Our hysterical aunt informed us that she could have died from the situation. No more pranks. By the way, she is my best friend, and I was the man of honor at her wedding, so all is forgiven. Story 13. Not sure how innocent it was, but I once told my mother I had a test I couldn't miss because she wanted my brother and me to stay home from school to be at the hospital while my grandfather had surgery. I didn't want to admit I was scared to be there, to see him like that, and to witness my family so distraught, so I lied. I came clean during the car ride to school. My mother intended to talk to the principal about rescheduling the test for me due to family circumstances. Story 14. Around third grade, a bully was picking on my best friend. So one day I confronted him and punched him in the face, breaking my hand as a result. I lied to everyone, including my parents, and told them I fell off a snow hill. There's a picture of me in a family album holding my cast up, looking all innocent. Story 15. When I was 10 years old, I became acquainted with Mr. Jerkoff. One day, I typed child porn into Google, mistakenly thinking it would show me some children-oriented content. My mom asked if I had typed that on the computer, and I said no, suggesting it might have been something my uncle did. The story doesn't have a dramatic ending. I believe they just realized it was my request. I had a mini stroke when I remembered that incident. Story 16. I went to a very small Catholic school. My 8th grade class had 8 graduates. I started my freshman year in a large high school. The kids all knew each other. They came from a school that had teams. I sat with a group of girls at lunch. One girl, Stacy, asked what team I was on. I lied and said I was on a team. She looked confused because I mentioned the team she was on and caught me in the lie. We were best friends for 30 years until she passed away from cancer last year. She brought up that lie constantly. Story 17. I told people I was a twin at school. When I moved to a new school, I told people I had a twin. With certain groups of friends, I was known as one name, and in other groups, I went by a different name. Both girls had different senses of humor and different hobbies. One wore her hair up in a ponytail, while I let my hair down quickly and added a headband. This situation escalated until the end of junior school when we had to sit for a standardized test in the school hall with everyone, and my friends noticed there was only one of me. Story 18. I was a military child, so we moved every couple of years. We relocated from Germany back to the United States, and I wanted to fit in with a group of girls who were passionate about lacrosse. I claimed I played at my old school, although I did not. When they mentioned trying out for the team, I panicked and said I couldn't play any sports anymore because I was injured. How was I injured? A major car accident, of course. A simple explanation. I began using that car accident as an excuse for many things I did not want to do, and it gained a life of its own. The main flaw in my risk assessment was that I did not consider the fact that military children are often stationed in the same locations. So when 2 girls from my school in Germany moved to my exact school in the United States, things became complicated very quickly. Story 19. I knew how to play the drums, which haunted me until I had to learn them to avoid being a liar. Story 20. That's really weird. No, I don't know why all the powdered cheese packets are missing from the boxes of macaroni and cheese. Mom. Story 21. This happened in elementary school. I have a 4-letter name, and my initials almost spell out my name. So, I lied and said I had 2 middle names, and now my initials spell my middle name. Where I live, there is a school pipeline, so I graduated high school with the same people I was with in kindergarten. I graduated high school, and people still believed it. But it wasn't all for nothing. I dropped my first name, swapped in the lie, and now it's my son's name. Story 22. My stepbrother had to stay after school. I don't remember why, probably detention. He was not the most obedient. Transportation and checking kids in and out were much less regulated. When you were done, it was your business how you got home. I was about 8 or 9, so he would have been a couple of years younger. The school was within walking distance, and my mom sent me to get him so he wouldn't have to walk alone. I didn't feel like it, so I just went out and played for a while, then came home and said I couldn't find him. My mom said I was lying, which I was, but I denied it. He eventually made it home. I decided to write about the incident in my diary. It didn't seem like a big deal. I was just writing about my day. My mom decided to read my diary. She thought it was a funny story and was telling my stepfather about it. Laughing. My stepfather was abusing me, and although I never wrote about it, I guess knowing that I wrote in a diary put fear in him that my mom would find out. He punished me severely and told my mom it was because I lied about my brother. He explained that to me as well, but looking back, I realized it was to scare me into not telling anyone anything and to prevent me from writing in a diary. It's been decades since then, and he's long out of my life. He was found out and served 8 years in prison. I haven't seen him since, but to this day, I still refuse to write anything in a diary. My secrets remain either in my head or are verbally shared with someone where I can deny them later. My mom reading my diary is such a core memory that I can almost remember verbatim what I wrote. Story 23. I have a headache. Can I stay home today? It turns out I was getting a headache. A bad one. So bad I had to leave school halfway through the day out of sheer agony. Felt like a bad experience for the next half year. I found out I had a cyst on the brain. Nothing life-threatening, but super annoying. I am now used to being lazy and not doing much. I hate migraines as I get them regularly now too. I genuinely have a poor memory of everything that happened before the operation and can lie casually on impulse. Story 24. I told my sister I never lie, and she spent 10 years closely observing me and challenging everything I said. Story 25. I told everyone I didn't like peanut butter because the texture annoyed me. Over 20 years later, I'm committed to this and genuinely have no idea what it even tastes like anymore. I could potentially love it, but I'm too scared to go back on what I said. Story 26. Back in junior high, I skipped school to meet up with some friends in the riverbed. The only problem was that nobody showed up. They were too scared to skip, so I decided to head back to school without considering how late I was. The principal saw me walking onto campus and asked why I was so late. I told him I was hiding from a man in a red Camaro who tried to get me into the car. The principal called the police, and a large search party went out looking for the would-be kidnapper. Story 27. I joked that I saw a scary-looking man peeking in the window at a childhood sleepover. My friend's mother became very upset, sent us all home at midnight, and went next door to scream at her neighbors, believing they were the imaginary window peekers. It was mortifying. Story 28. Oh God, I just remembered this. I would rather this had stayed repressed. I was probably 6 or 7, and my friend and I decided we were pregnant. Yes, we just decided that we were. Because we didn't understand what pregnant meant, I guess. We told a bunch of kids at school, and completely unsurprisingly, it got back to our parents. My mom made me go to the gynecologist to talk to me about birth control at 6 or 7 years old. I was hysterical the entire time. I understand there might be a concern. I'm not a parent, but I would definitely wonder if something happened to my child if I heard this secondhand. That wasn't her concern, though. She genuinely seemed to think I was out there having sex, not that I was just confused about the reproductive system. I don't remember her even trying to ask me questions about where I came up with this idea. She just immediately decided I was a promiscuous kindergartner and proceeded to scar me for life. This became par for the course with her for the rest of my life. Story 29. We moved to a new town when I was 5 years old. We transitioned from a multicultural area to a rather homogeneous one, and I immediately felt intimidated and out of place, along with the other emotions one experiences as a kindergartner in a completely new environment. On my first day at school, I pretended not to speak English. It was only partially untrue because I was bilingual and could legitimately speak another language, but I simply said, "No English." I pretended not to understand and would get frustrated when the teacher or other students spoke to me. To avoid dealing with me, the teacher seated me in a corner with crayons to color and mostly left me alone, which made me very happy. I maintained this act for a few days until the teacher called my parents for a meeting and was quite shocked to learn that we had not moved from overseas but from another town in the same state. After that, the charade was over. My mom was not happy. As for why it took so long to contact my parents, I have no idea. This was the early 2000s as well, so it was not especially difficult to reach them. Story 30. Once I told a prefect at school that an attractive woman kissed me that morning, and he went and told the deputy head. I had to explain that it was a joke, but maybe I was kissed by an attractive woman. My mom. Story 31. One time, I told my mom that I was allergic to carrots, so I wouldn't have to eat them. She believed me, so I got away with it for weeks. But then, my little sister started asking why I could eat other vegetables, and I had to start making up fake allergies to broccoli and peas. Eventually, it all came crashing down when she told my mom I was lying, and I was forced to eat carrots in front of her. The worst part? I actually like them now. Story 32. I was a little dyslexic in elementary school, although my parents and I did not realize it at the time. It spiraled out of control when they held a parent-teacher meeting about my being pulled out of classes for extra help with schoolwork and then reintegrated into the classroom. This continued with my being moved from grade-level English to an easier English class, and I was instructed to meet with a teacher whose sole job was to assist students one-on-one in a small room at the school. I had to see him twice a week from elementary school all the way through my senior year of high school. Story 33. I didn't really spiral, but I feel bad about it now. I was a smart enough kid in school. During my sophomore year, a girl in one of my classes was killed in a car accident, and after that, my grades slipped. I was in a bad place and took it pretty hard, and my grades in math reflected it. I started out with an overall grade of 95 for the first 6 weeks, then it dropped to 92. After my friend passed away, it fell further to 85, then 79, 72, and in the final 6 weeks, I made a 59. However, I received an exemplary score on the annual state test, which added 10 points to my grade, bumping it up to 69. Both my parents were teachers, so they knew if I was generally a well-behaved kid, which I was. They believed there were a few extra credit points available to give me a passing grade. Unfortunately, this teacher must have really been difficult because he failed me with a 69. I never reminded my parents about the 10-point bump, so they continued to think he was unfair. A similar situation occurred the next year. I was still pretty disengaged and would often fall asleep in math class. I was averaging around a 50 when my parents discovered the teacher was violating district policy regarding grades and tests. My dad had a parent-teacher conference with her. He told me to step out and confronted her. When he came out, he was red-faced. I didn't have the courage to tell my dad I was failing because I had become a bad student, and it wasn't her fault. I avoided responsibility twice, and I regret that. I would not recommend having existential crises while in high school. Story 34. When I was in primary school, I once couldn't find my pencil case in my school bag. I genuinely thought someone had stolen it from me. The teacher and my parents believed me because similar incidents had happened before, such as a classmate putting my new boots in the toilet. Back then, there was something like an insurance for school children, and my mom and the teacher submitted some paperwork for this. A couple of days later, I realized that the pencil case was actually in my bag. It was just buried under a lot of other items. I was a messy child. When I figured this out, my heart sank because everyone else was convinced that someone must have stolen my pencil case, but I was just too messy to search properly in my bag. I was too ashamed to admit this. On my way home, I threw the pencil case into the bushes. I felt guilty and ashamed the entire day. I still remember this as one of the worst days of my childhood. If I remember correctly, I wet the bed the next night, which had never happened to me at that age. Very soon, I couldn't live with the lie anymore and told my mom. She understood and promised not to tell anyone at school that I had simply overlooked the pencil case. The insurance covered it. I'm not sure if my parents later paid back the money, probably because they are honest people, but I don't remember. My mom suggested I go look for the pencil case in the bushes, but I never found it again, even though not much time had passed. I have no idea what happened to it. I thought I had hidden it quite well. Perhaps an animal took it. Story 35. I used to live in a private community, and one day we had a congressman visiting. I made a small joke pretending I was kidnapped. I had a bit of trouble afterward, but overall it was a great joke. Story 36. I was half Canadian. Despite never having set foot outside Scotland, kids are naive and couldn't understand why I didn't speak with a Canadian accent. So I adopted one and had to maintain it for years. Story 37. Around 3rd grade, a bully was picking on my best friend. So one day I confronted him and punched him in the face, breaking my hand as a result. I lied to everyone, including my parents, and told them I fell off a snow hill. There's a picture of me in a family album holding my cast up, looking innocent. Story 38. When I was in 4th grade, I told my classmates I knew how to play the bass, presumably because I thought that was more believable than saying I played the guitar. I switched schools, believing that would be the end of it, but many of the kids from my 4th grade class also transferred to the same school, and the lie followed me. I began reading bass player magazines and learning about bass terminology and famous bass players so I could discuss bass playing intelligently. However, it became increasingly difficult to decline my friends' requests to start bands in 6th and 7th grade. Finally, when I was in high school, my parents bought me an old used bass for Christmas so I could stop lying about playing bass because I actually did. Story 39. This question immediately makes me think of a classic Charlie Brooker clip. Story 40. Not me, but a friend's brother was in daycare. He told his mother that one of the teachers took off his underwear after he repeatedly asked her not to. This was quite alarming, as I'm from New Zealand and it was the early 1990s when a huge sexual abuse case had occurred in daycare centers. It turns out he had wet his pants and they found some replacement ones for him, but he didn't like the color. I could see how it could get out of control. Story 41. I signed my mother's name on a progress report in 3rd grade. I was very sneaky about it. I used a pencil and kept erasing and signing it again to try to make it perfect. I turned that in with eraser holes and all. My teacher took one look and told me she was calling my mother, so I unplugged the phone every night for a week until my teacher figured it out and called her during the day. I got in a lot of trouble. It was the first time I got a spanking. I never tried to deceive my mother like that again. I didn't get to go to Blockbuster for months. It was very disappointing. Story 42. I disliked going to church as a child, and one Sunday I was not in the mood to participate in activities, so I pretended to have a seizure to avoid attending the service. My mother took me to the hospital, where they conducted various tests but could not find anything wrong. This resulted in about another month of hospital visits before they deemed it a random event. I still have not confessed to this day. Story 43. When I was a child, I got out of bed in the middle of the night to sneak some apple juice. I tripped on the way back and made a noise, so I hid the evidence and slipped under my covers before I was caught. My parents woke up alarmed and immediately went to my room to ask if I was out of bed. I pretended to be groggy and lied to avoid getting in trouble. My parents believed me and checked around the house, even calling the police, assuming we had been broken into. The police arrived and searched the property for signs of a break-in, but found nothing. Not until they all left did I finally confess to my actions, much to my parents' amusement. To this day, it's a family joke to loudly announce, "I am just getting a snack. No need to call the police," anytime we are visiting and feel the late-night snack urge. Story 44. Around the 2002 Olympics, I realized my friend was extremely gullible. I could tell him the sky was green and the grass was blue, and he'd believe it. A few weeks before the games began, my family had a trip planned to go skiing in Utah, so I decided to tell him I was going to film a commercial for Coca-Cola that would air during the Olympics. What harm could that cause, right? Well, after the Olympics ended and there was no commercial with me promoting Coca-Cola, I learned that my friend had taken it upon himself to tell everyone in our grade that I was going to be famous. I was going to be the next Frankie Muniz or Shia LaBeouf, and a lot of people were mad at me for not being in a commercial. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.